Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. This time, the Outcasts. Yeah, that's how they describe me and Jimmy, Jerome, and Keith on the Reddit feeds, even the subreddits. The Outcasts, and It's All Been Checked Before. Don't be an outcast. Be a leader. Be an incast. Is that a thing? I don't know, but I'll tell you what is the thing. Patreon.com/IABD. Very, very inexpensive. Even if you are an outcast, you can scrounge together a couple bucks. Get the bonus content. You get to see our mugs. You get to see what the Outcasts look like. And now you get to hear about the Outcast. The Outcast on It's All Been Checked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Shrek Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
And the invisible Keith.
And the Outcast, Jimmy Jerome. We are here to talk about the Outcast. First impressions.
I guess overall, I was surprised at the way they were able to handle some of the discussions going on here. Or rather, the very thinly veiled allegory they were going for, I think played better than I would have expected it to now. Considering when it was actually performed. And it seems more topical than I would have expected in certain ways. Obviously that wasn't like pitch perfect, but I was surprised by a few things.
Yeah, we talked in the green room, and Jimmy mentioned how I don't know that you said on the nose, but something along those lines of it was but that said, I still enjoyed it. I thought it was really very interesting. I thought the way that for a while, and I think it's one of my older episodes is just Riker and Soren having conversations and getting closer, just their relationship the entire time.
Yeah.
And not even getting into the other stuff. I thought even with it being like, okay, this is very like, yeah, we get it. We get where you're going here. I still thought it was very fascinating. And I think it's one of my favorite Jonathan Frakes performances and Riker episodes, moments.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed that. I thought it was one of the more interesting. It still was kind of a Planet of the Week episode in a sense, and I don't know, maybe we revisit the Janai later, but
Damn it, Jimmy.
Sorry, the answer's no.
All right, then
we don't.
Then it is a kind of a Planet of the Week thing, but it's still interesting, well done. And I thought there were some good moments with the rest of the crew and Riker as well. And we'll get into that as we discuss.
Yeah, I did say it was on the nose, but like in the tradition of some good original series episodes that were also on the nose, it felt like original series. I believe Steven made the comment in the chat that they just needed a better title. And some of the ones we threw out there were like, I'm going back to our chat. For my vagina is hollow and I have touched a dick. Requiem for Magini. Is there in truth no gender? The trouble with testicles. Who mourns for a dong? Cat's paw. And where no man has gone before, obviously.
Just cat's paw.
So those were some of the titles we tossed out. But yeah, there were things that didn't quite line up for me. I thought Riker was a little out of character. He flipped really fast from one thing to another. And some of the emotional stuff didn't feel earned for me. But I did think it was a good issue to bring up. It felt like it's still a message that needs put out today, which is sad because it's been so long and some people did not pay enough attention to this episode apparently all those years ago. But at the same, there were several times during this episode that I'm like, man, I can't believe they were able to air this in the early 90s.
Yeah, and so, I thought it felt very like if it was on right now, it'd be like, oh, they're just trying to be in with the times or whatever. Yeah. And back then, they definitely were not trying to be in with the times.
Yeah, I don't even think I would have understood it the same way back then, honestly.
Probably not. Me too. I'm with you.
Yeah, it reminded me of a science fiction story and this was in Playboy magazine. So I read it in junior high.
The best articles, yeah.
Actually, I read
before the articles, of course.
It was a collection of science fiction work from Playboy magazine. So it's I got it out of the library, but one of the first stories in it was about this world where heterosexuality was outlawed, and it was like, and in a sense, it was also on the notes. It's like, well, yeah, that's something we, us woke people back in the 80s, not that I was that woke by any means, but just, it was very on the money. It's like on the nose of like, oh, okay, I see where they're going with this, but it was really well done. And the detail in it was really good, especially for like a 15-page short story. That one's always stayed with me, and this reminded me of that because the whole time I was watching, I was, and I think Soren even says, or maybe Riker says it. Somebody says, well, if this was the other way around, oh yeah, it was Soren, because she was like, well, your way seems strange to me, and and all that stuff. And then we get into the,
do we refer to Soren as female or not as we talk about them? Because they eventually identify as female,
right?
But then the society fixes, in the air quotes, them back to non-gender.
I wouldn't have known conversion therapy was a thing back then. I'm sure it was, but so watching now, obviously, it was like, oh yeah, we're working on outlawing that. Lots of places have, lots of places haven't.
It had the very uncomfortable ending, and we'll get to it, of course, but that very uncomfortable ending where she's been brainwashed back into the cult. And that is scary and not cool.
Cult. That's interesting.
A whole society that's a cult. I mean, any religion that forces your behavior in such a way, I will refer to as a cult, which basically describes just about every religion. But
I wouldn't say this was a religion, though. This was more of a societal framework, and that's trying to mirror what we have. And I think some of our justifications for the way things are based in religion. But I think a lot of things people want to justify are based in religion as well. But I think there's that the whole way of thinking that we have has been ingrained in us, like worldwide, regardless of,
Well, and you make a good point, because there's nothing said about religion in this, but it almost seems like it's liberalism gone too far. It almost seems like a very conservative episode,
right?
Because it's like, oh, now we're so past gender that we're not even allowed to go backwards or refer to somebody as a he or she.
That is, I'm not sure if I wrote that down exactly, but that is one of those thoughts was nagging at me throughout.
That's
this.
A good take.
Is that it almost over rotated to the point when this is the problem with a lot of things that people try to handle, is that some people, the people who need it the most, might not actually get where they're going exactly. They'll back in the original series stuff, you would have the really heavy-handed racism things, where you would have something like a complete reversal, and it took that much probably for a lot of people to even be able to empathize or even be able to they could not do it unless you spelled it out for them like this. Look, if this were you in this situation, if this were somebody who looked like you and they're being discriminated against in this way, oh my God, wow, that would be awful. But sometimes if you make it too on the nose, as what was happening in this, it ends up being like that kind of, what would you call it? Not a straw man necessarily, but something, the wrong people are going to grab onto this and say, look, this is what it would be like, right? Or,
yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm saying this right.
That's a great point both you guys are illustrating, because I just finished watching the latest Matrix movie. And actually, I rewatched the Matrix, the first one, a couple weeks ago, and then I watched the last three this week in like 3 days, and then I did a bunch of reading on it. And as you guys know, there's been a lot of right-wing co-opting of the red pill, blue pill stuff.
Oh God,
which is not. And then the Wachowskis are like, they're like, no, it's about our journey, our transition, or being, feeling like we're trapped in a male body or whatever, kind of thing. And they're both now identify as women. Which when I read that the first time I read that, I'm like, oh, that makes total sense.
I don't know why that didn't occur to me.
Yeah, even knowing about the Wachowskis and their transitions by both of them, it still never dawned on me. And then when I read that, I was like, it was one of those Fight Club moments where it's like everything washed over me, like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. But I was reading this very long article about how the right wings kind of co-opted it and that kind of stuff, and they kind of got into, well, this is, that's the thing. When you put something out like that, it can be interpreted those different ways. Whether it's completely vague, like a Coldplay song, as they put it out, or if it's on the nose, and even then, people can still take it one way or the other. So.
We should specify, because we're recording this like 6 months before it airs. Right wing was a thing we used to have in this country before we defeated them and saved the nation 6 months ago. And I'm sure by now you've forgotten all about the right wing and how crazy they'd been.
For people, this is one of our behind the curtain things. This week we released The Host on our feed, which was the Host, which was also explored some of these themes, or at least LGBT themes.
Yes,
and was we thought it was a little on the nose, but also didn't go far enough. And I when my reading after this, going back, the trans community feels the same way about this episode, that it didn't go far enough, which is interesting. Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, I think this one did a better job than the host in dealing with the issue. I do too. But that's fair.
Yeah.
So back at the beginning of the episode, there's lots of aliens on the bridge. We're not used to seeing that many extras and that many non-humans.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very, that's right where we jump into fashion right away. Because we can talk about all these people whose clothing was very different than the uniforms. Although you could say it was kind of a generic uniform they were wearing, which could be for budgetary reasons, or it could actually fit in line with the society.
Right. But the other, actually, then this won't surprise anyone who, especially those who are Patreon folks. I was, androgyny can go so many ways. They could have gone with the long hair androgyny, instead of the short hair androgyny. My hair is long enough now that I am in the zone of when I go out to a restaurant quite often, especially if they come up from behind, they'll be like, and what would you ladies like tonight? And then they always apologize. I'm like, no, hey, how can I be offended? I have this long hair. And then I also say, well, I am very pretty. But then they're like, I didn't see your face. I saw your hair. And then I order a food. I order food. But anyway, they could have gone the other way with that. The other thing I thought, and this could be spoiler alert for you folks who are caught up on Discovery, their look reminded me of Adira on Discovery Now, which I think is season 3. So Keith, you may be there. But
she comes in early. They come in early season 3.
Yes, yeah. So you may have met them. Yes. And did they refer to? I think they did refer to them as, or they them, the Janai in the episode. Other than our girl Soren, our girl Soren, she was a girl for a while, but yeah,
she was a girl from birth, but she was afraid to identify as a girl.
That's right. Yeah,
I think it's fair to refer to Soren as female pronouns here because that's what Soren felt like, and that's what Soren was. That the society objected to. So I think for the purposes of this discussion, we're safe calling Soren she. Soren played by Melinda Kalia, best known for Brotherly Love, as well as this role. Also in an episode of The X-Files and a handful of guest spots.
She was, to go back a little further, she was one of the original stars of the A-Team.
Amy Amanda Allen.
Early on. And George Papard, who was, I can't remember his name on the A-Team.
Hannibal.
Because I didn't watch it, Joe. Hannibal? Yeah, the leader. In real life, George Papard he didn't think the woman should be part of the A-Team. So he saw to it that her role got cut back. So, yep. So for all you Breakfast at Tiffany's fans, George Papard, jerk off in real life. At least in this instance. I can't say all the time, but at least in this instance. Good actor, though. Good actor.
Yeah, Stephen, you kind of touched on one of my alternate episodes. My alternate episode was, and I wonder how it would have been received had this been the case. But if they had gone with a male actor that looked feminine versus a female actor that looked more male, would they have been able to air it? Would they have had protests that Riker was involved in a homosexual relationship? Because, I know we toyed with that a little bit in the host, like you mentioned, but even on DS9, they had a real issue of like, well, you can say these two girls dated, but you can't show them kiss, like that was a thing.
Right.
At this era. So I feel like that would have been a lot more controversial. And this probably was the only way they could have done it.
And I think I read that was the reason they went the way they did, was we can't get away with this other one. One other thing, Melinda Kalea, she was also on Knots Landing for several episodes. One of my favorites.
My last fashion note before we move on from fashion is Geordi's facial hair. There are only a few episodes in the series. There's more than one, but there are very few episodes of the series where he gets to rock the facial hair, and he'd have it, and they'd make him shave it. And it's like, why not let him have it? He looks great.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I wrote, does Geordi have a beard to make him extra male for this episode? I felt like that's what they were going for.
Not right.
This is what men are like.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Jonathan Frakes was like, no, I'm the bearded one. The rest of you have to shave.
He saw to it just like Papard.
No, I feel like it's very similar that they wanted LeVar Burton to look a certain way, the same thing that Avery Brooks dealt with when he came on Deep Space Nine, that he wanted to have the shaved head and look all cool, which they eventually let him do, but instead they made him have the balding, the receding hairline and stuff, originally as Commander Sisko. And he didn't, the actor didn't like it. He didn't look as good. He didn't look as cool. And there's just a certain non-threatening way they want actors to look. And if they feel like they cross that line, thankfully, Deep Space Nine got over it and let Avery Brooks look as awesome as he deserved to look later. But so they launched the probe, and it just disappeared before the opening credits. And my only thought was, is this scene supposed to be intense? Because they're playing it like it should be intense. Like, oh my God, we launched a probe and it disappeared. But it did not feel intense at all to me. It felt very bureaucratic.
That occurred to me as well. We skipped over. Well, I wanted to say first of all that they did a make it so in the cold open as well, just like pretty close to that of the gate. So,
I mean, they say make it so a lot next week.
Yes, they do. Repeatedly. We have another generic title here, The Outcast. I probably do this every 6 weeks. I realized it was season 5, episode 17. I was like, man, we're out there on this journey, on this mission. So, pretty amazing.
Well, not in the grand scheme of how many things are out there now.
Sure.
But
I mean, I'll just say I sat down this past week, and because we said we're going to do this podcast in the release order when things came out. So we put the original series movies that are in the next gen in there. So I sat down and made a spreadsheet, went through all the dates of DS9 and Voyager and next gen and all the overlapping that's coming up. And we are not that far away from the beginning of Deep Space Nine. And I'm really looking forward to that back and forth.
Love it. I love that
structure
too.
When does the last next gen movie come out? Is that late night?
During Enterprise.
Oh, okay. So it's down the road.
Yeah, it comes out a couple seasons into Enterprise.
Okay.
All
right.
So we got a ways to go. There'll be that next gen carry through all the way into the. I mean, really, when we get to the end of Enterprise, that's the end of a big era of Star Trek, and I think we'll do a special episode where we just talk about the era as a whole because it was so much, and even as separate as Enterprise felt, you'll see there are ways it's been included in that era of Star Trek. Yeah. But anyway.
There are a couple things we touched on that I want to just get back to quickly before we move on. And just, I wanted to ask, were any of the Janai played by men?
That's a good question. The 3 named Janai were all played by women. Because we've got Callan White, who played the nosy one that we didn't like, who's best known for The Choice and then this role, as well as Jag in The Practice, a lot of guest star spots. I don't see a Seinfeld in there. That was the only that Trek. And then Megan Cole, who played the judge, best known, again, for this role, as well as a 2-episode role she did on DS9, different character. And
also
guesting on ER and Eli Stone.
She was in 2 episodes of Seinfeld, actually, Megan Cole. She was Peggy. She was in 1 episode, The Apology, where she's a germphobe, and so she puts down when she goes she's in the bathroom with Elaine, she puts down something over the toilet, and then she doesn't want to drink from the same water bottle.
Oh.
So at some point they invite, but it turns out she tells Putty about it, and Putty's a germphobe, so they get together. And this is the episode also where Kramer decides he's just going to stay in the shower all the time. And they're eating the food, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I prepared this in the shower." And they're like, "What?" And then Peggy, Megan Cole, ends up throwing it up, or spitting it out, I should say, not throwing it up. The other episode, which is probably the one people know better, is the Susie, where
was she playing the same role?
Yes, Peggy, who works with Elaine, and so and I think that was the first one. The Susie was the first one where she calls Elaine Susie, and so the whole episode she calls her Susie. And so Elaine just goes with it, but then eventually, not Putty, Peterman thinks there's a Susie and all this stuff. So Elaine ends up killing off Susie, and and then at the end she's like, "I'm Susie," and then so that's that episode. She's in that too. She's really great at it, and she's actually a great stage actor from everything I read. So, but anyway, that's the episode that ends with one of the. If you look for Julia Louis-Dreyfus Seinfeld blooper reels, there's the scene at the funeral for Susie. And Peggy's sitting behind Seinfeld and Elaine, and they're talking about Susie and Elaine, and Seinfeld's like, "Yeah, and I slept with both of them." and Julia Louis-Dreyfus cannot keep it together through like 10 or 11 takes. She's just cracking up, and Megan Cole can keep it together. She doesn't crack the entire time. Every time, she's very good. So anyway.
My point in bringing that up, though, at a couple of things I was saying about that, I think the problem with trying to execute something like this in real life is that they have to be played by human actors or actresses. So you can't really get the full effect of what it would be like to actually have an androgynous species. And they never really I don't think they got explicitly into what their genitalia would be like, typically. Or they just...
No, they talked about how they like fertilize a husk.
Right.
Inseminating a husk, which to me sounded like an Andrew Dice Clay bit from around this time. So, canceled. I
did read as you were talking about Seinfeld that Jonathan Frakes called them out on casting a woman in this role and said it wasn't gutsy enough, that they should have gone for it. That had him with the man. And apparently Star Trek had been getting a lot of letter writing campaigns that, hey, you deal with racism all the time. Why aren't you dealing with homosexuality?
Yeah.
They also had a line that was cut from this episode where Riker, when he's talking to the judge says, we're a highly evolved society, enlightened society. And Riker says, then how is it that you won't let her choose her sexual orientation? And they cut that line because they thought that would get them into trouble.
That's insane. I mean, I know it's not, but it is. I mean, it's like in the 60s when TOS was like, when Shatner had to sneak in the kiss with Nichelle Nichols.
I also see here that LeVar Burton got in trouble for a beard this episode because it was not authorized. They did allow him to grow it for 2 other episodes because he was getting married in real life. And so they let him have the beard because he wanted the beard for his wedding. They let Geordi have a beard in 2 other episodes. And then in 2 movies, they let him have a beard. But yeah.
That's so
to get
strange.
Back to the genitalia or the organ talk, as Soren puts it, tell me about your organs, which I found, but I don't think Riker ever asked.
Yeah, that should have been reciprocated at that point.
Riker already knew. Riker had studied up.
But
he's already slept with Janae in the holodeck.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
My point though is they made Riker seem really coy through a lot of these things and really hesitant. I think you're talking before about the changing character. That's one of the things I would have noticed is that, especially in that discussion, he was like, well, this isn't sure. Of course, there's like, well, this isn't quite appropriate. I know that maybe I probably shouldn't be encouraging this kind of thing. Maybe I've been briefed to some extent, and he's kind of avoiding the talk. But at the same time, that seemed like a pretty straightforward kind of discussion that he shouldn't have been as uncomfortable having.
Something that occurred to me as they were having the discussion about the genitalia and how do you do it is we've established, especially in the original series, we've mentioned this on the podcast before, that 2 sexes is universal. So apparently it's no longer universal. The rules are gone. That's an outdated Star Trek idea.
It's also a joke in Matrix Resurrections. There's a joke. There's a really good joke about binary. So, but yeah, that's completely blown out of the water.
And while you're talking about Matrix Resurrections, Jada Pinkett Smith's makeup in that movie looks like it came from old Star Trek.
That's right.
The aging makeup. So, Riker gets excited by this whole thing, I think, because it's forbidden. You know, that's one of his little.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably part of it, but I mean, this is kind of coming back to something I was going to bring up. Hopefully we can get into it more later. But my point is that you have this attractive woman playing this role. And so for the audience's sake, I mean, it certainly seems in character for Riker or anyone as we are meant to be put in his position. We would see, this looks like an attractive woman. This sounds like an attractive woman. Of course, he's going to be tempted by whatever's happening here, as opposed to if they were truly like just featureless or something. There was no indication of any sort of like maleness or femaleness. But how would you do that? Yeah,
because I recognized her and I knew her, so I definitely was like, oh, this isn't I mean, Soren's not unattractive, but the only counter I have to that, Keith, and one of the things I liked about the episode is that I thought I liked the long conversations they had, which is like. Yeah. And I think the 2 actors sold it really well. I don't think any of us were surprised when she's like, "I'm into you," and we knew Riker was into it.
Right.
Yeah, I think your point's well taken, but I think, the counter, like I said, the counter is that I think the actors sell it that they're not only, it's not about the genitalia. It is, I find this person very interesting and they're very fascinating. They're very capable, and when they're both like, I'm a good pilot. Well, I'm a pretty good pilot too. You know what? Let's do this together. And then, for them to have all that time together and, the scene where they go to fix the thing on the shuttle, that was, to me, that was one of the intense may not be the right word, but like
Charged.
Charged. Perfect. That's it. A sexually charged repair job. I was gonna
say the whole premise of that scene bothered me because why are they fixing the shuttle? Wouldn't they just take another shuttle? Wouldn't an engineer fix the shuttle? It didn't make any sense to me that the first officer and this guest were fixing the shuttle.
Well, I think that's by because that point, they didn't want to. They were like, you know what? We'll handle this. We can handle this. Just the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of that kind of the whole seductive dance of pretext of just these are reasons why we need to spend more time together.
Yes.
And that you can see that play out. And I just as I said, I mean, it's or as I guess as more as you were saying, I bought a lot of the attraction, everything was going on, and there a lot of things seemed justified. But I feel like, and this is probably what Frakes' point would have been, is it didn't feel bold enough. It didn't feel like a departure enough because they made it so palatable to us as a mainstream audience. And it was like, yeah, of course, this is I do that too, kind of thing. But
yeah, I think you're right. And their conversation starts when they're talking about pea soup and all that. At first, I'm like, oh, we're getting really cliched. Like Riker almost said, "Men are from Mars, women are from Venus," kind of a thing. And I was like, oh boy, oh geez.
And Jin and I are from Jupiter, apparently.
And they asked, well, I think Riker asked the question, well, who leads when you dance or whatever, which is that's like to reference the Seinfeld thing. It's like when Elaine's going to the lesbian wedding and the woman on the subway is like, well, who wears the tux? Who does this or that or whatever? Yeah. And that's a joke on that side. And that's only 5 years later, maybe, or maybe 4 years later, but different show, obviously.
But that's kind of the point too, is the antiquated nature, and it's kind of an old fashioned kind of joke, or an old fashioned even kind of thing to wonder for it being supposed to be that far in the future. Yeah. And one of the things that jumped out was it's on the one hand, it was kind of a frank kind of thing that people would want to, as far as the discussion would have, like, what do I call you? Or being called out for using the wrong pronouns, and that kind of, he wasn't quite indignant about it, but that, I think that's one of the things that jumped out as me as being like, this is what a conservative audience would probably want to say, or jump or latch on to, like, yeah, take that.
Yeah,
like this is the sort of joke that we often make on the show is he probably should have heard of they by then.
Yeah.
Him being in the future, that he could just say, oh, I'll call you they instead, or,
Yeah.
But I guess, had that even really, well, it certainly wasn't popular in media as far as I know back then, even the concept of that. So,
yeah. Riker mentions the battle of the sexes, I think, at some point, all that stuff, which, I mean, I get it, because,
but that should be over by the 24th century.
Yeah. Well, he does say, if they laugh at my jokes, that's a big deal, which it is to me.
and the way that she gave that laugh, like right after that, is, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's so.
And then he just sums it up by saying it's complex. I'm like, yeah, you're right. It is.
When they talk about,
but any relationship is complex.
And they talk about such ridiculous things like, oh, only women add color to their face, and men like to pretend they're not doing anything to attract a mate.
Well, that's when we get to the Crusher thing. Now, before
gossiping, which seemed a little out of character.
Before we leave Riker, I was going to say, overall, though, I really appreciated the tone of how that was going, and it felt, nice, comfortable. Even with some of the antiquated things put in there, that was where I was sort of impressed by the way it was playing. Now, when we get to Crusher, as you were saying, that's where it got really kind of stilted, and just like I know that she made this big show of like, God, I guess there used to be sexism once upon a time. I guess there was a time when people thought that women might be inferior.
Yeah,
I've never heard of that though. I've never experienced that, and we've seen in TOS we have like the I want to say Rand. Was that like the cigarette girl essentially who was coming onto the bridge?
Like Captain Yeoman. Yes.
Yep. Yeoman Rand. Yes. Okay. That's why I was like, going ensign. No, Yeoman. That's the reason why it didn't sound natural. But that's my point. Is it just felt like very much then even, and Kirk would go on these diatribes about like differences between men and women, and that kind of.
Well, and then Worf. Again, I think this is out of character for Worf. I mean, if he had said human women, maybe it would be in character. But he just says like women are weak and they have to play Federation rules or women's game because they're weaker and they need help. And I'm like, Worf likes strong women. Why is he insulting women? Like, I don't.
I put that they made him a handy workaround to give like the contemporary attitude to the time of voice in this whole discussion. And it's. I don't know. I don't know if they've really established what they think of Klingon women and thoroughly enough up to this point. We know by a certain point we certainly see them in leadership roles, but at the same time they're supposed to be these backward Neanderthal kind of things. Whenever they want to throw that in there,
but we've seen strong, powerful, battle-ready women in the Klingon. Yeah.
I also wonder if that line is in there so that later when he goes to help Riker, it's kind of like, oh, Worf's come around and he's here for his friend. And maybe this is where I was when I was watching. I was very touched by Worf being like, "Hey, I'm coming with you, buddy."
I thought that was more about Worf's friendship with Riker than any changed attitude.
It was, but I thought a little part of that they were kind of saying, you know what? He just decided, you know what, buddy, love is love. I'm coming with you.
No, I totally agree. I think that was almost entirely the point of that. I mean, those were like his only two appearances, essentially, where they're like, I don't know how to approve of this. This is so weird. And now it's like, oh, you're gonna, I get it. Let's go.
I did write down because I think in that conversation you were talking about, I think maybe it's Crusher says women are considered superior, and I wrote, yeah, yes.
No, I don't think she ever. I mean, she
something like that.
She was asked if women were inferior.
That's what it is. That's what it was.
And that was where she went to that whole. Well, I guess at one point maybe they thought that, but.
And I thought, and this is true, I guess now and in the future, apparently. But those kind of generalizations, I think, tend to end up reflecting more on the individual making those generalizations than any truth. And I think it's been recognized for a while at this point that. As comedians and stuff, men do this and women do that stuff. I mean, I think comedians and just people in general have gotten better at, I can write a joke about this particular guy is a Neanderthal, as opposed to, well, all men are this and da-da-da, and, Tim Allen, Home Improvement, blah, 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 that but don't even get me started. But that's a different podcast. That's our comedians we don't like podcast. He is from Michigan. He is a Pistons fan.
It's all been improved to rewatch it.
One note we skipped over that just to throw in, but when the shuttle went to the edge of the anomaly, I thought the shot with the engine cut open was kind of cool.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, I didn't catch it. Yeah, well.
Then my next notes are when they go into the white void, the null space, and they talk about the transporter being all touchy, but then. And they say, we only have one more chance to beam these guys, or sorry, they're not guys, to beam these members of the Janai, or else we're not going to be able to get back. So it works. They beam them. Great. Yeah. And then I'm expecting them to turn around and fly back. And instead they try to beam themselves off, which fails. And then they're stuck because they don't have enough energy to get back. And I'm like, why are you trying to beam now? Why are you not turning around and going back? Well, you only have one shot.
I thought the idea was they couldn't get out of the null space, maybe.
No, they said they could still get out. They had enough transporter juice for one more attempt at rescue and still get out. And so they made the rescue, and then they tried to transport again. When Riker first beams down to the surface for that little party thing, there's some very interesting insect noises going on that were definitely not Earth insects.
I don't know if I caught that.
Yeah, because and they had them turned up real loud.
They did. They did. They're like, hey, we spent all this effort on making an alien insect mix. You're going to hear it.
You might as well. I mean, I think that's actually a very good reason to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
And, it makes sense. It's a different planet. It might be louder than here.
So
that too.
When Riker goes for the kiss, at this point, I didn't buy it. I know they had some flirtation and some buildup, but it didn't seem nearly enough for him to go for kissing her. I mean, he definitely would have considered the implications if he had thought about it before this. And it didn't feel natural to be spontaneous. I didn't feel like I hadn't seen enough interest from him as it happened. But again, like, he should know better. And I feel like there should be some thought to the implications, whereas he just seemed to be like, nope, I'm not even going to give it a thought what might happen. I'm just going to jump in.
You keep using that word, the implications. What do you mean by that?
Because she already told him this is for. She already told him it's forbidden.
You know, the implication,
the consequences of the actions.
It's an Always Sunny reference.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
Anyway, I noted a couple things sort of similar to that, but I think by the time they were out in that forest, they knew why they were there.
Yeah,
it seemed to be clear that what I wondered before that, though, was when he was sitting out there, he seemed like that kind of like, oh shucks, I don't go for these big parties and stuff, and I just need space. And I didn't know if that was him trying to like engage his part of the dance to be out there to pull her away, or if he was like, I'm too tempted, I need to stay away from this.
See, if anything, to me, it was like it would have been him considering, like, if I went for this, what would happen to her? Oh, lots of bad stuff, so I better not go for it. And Riker doesn't let his hormones rule him. He enjoys his hormones, but he doesn't let them rule him.
But that's the point. I think by the time he said yes to go off, there was that they're already exchanging that moment there, and they're them leaving at that point was.
I just didn't feel it. I didn't feel like it was earned.
I do, but maybe that's just because I was into maybe I was feeling the pheromones and the hormones myself. And I'm also comparing it to Requiem from Methuselah, which I talk about all the time, and this has a similar ending that, in that episode, I know, and I still feel that way. Like, you've got that great moment at the end, forget. But everything before that, the entire episode does not earn it enough. And again, I think what makes it better here, or for me makes it better, is the time they do spend together. But to go to the previous question on the floor of, how does Riker get to that point? She says she leans female, or essentially she says, well, I'm female, I'm whatever. He gets a grin on his face like, oh yeah, this is happening. And so I also think it's the thing, I think maybe you both mentioned, that it is kind of a taboo thing. It's like, when am I going to be in Janai again? Kind of a thing. But I also think he did feel a connection. I mean, the fact that he goes and talks to Troy about it.
Yeah.
But I also think, because that's part of me is like, maybe Soren isn't completely brainwashed. Maybe she's just like, this is not going to work. Because we talked similarly on the Post episode about, man, these guys just met 10 days ago. And this is very similar, and in that episode, Odan, the Trill, is like, you got to leave with me, Crusher. And she's like, no. And some of it's because the Trill's in a different body. And this one, Riker is doing a similar thing, like, and it's very similar to Kirk in Requiem from Methuselah. Like, come on, man, you can leave all this behind. You can come with me. And and obviously she was down for the makeout session, whatever followed that. But I'm not sure she was completely brainwashed, or if she was also like, you know what, I'm not so sure I'm ready to chuck all this.
Right. That's another great point, actually.
I think that's going on in there too.
So that leads me to a couple of thoughts there. First of all, yes, it could just be a simple like, am I ready to throw away my life for this anyway, and just go off on a starship with this person? He said he loved her, and she was like, okay, I know I am noting that, but I've got to go. If you think about how, obviously I have no idea what someone would actually feel like after they come out of conversion therapy, but how much of that is them just being, I've been tortured enough to say whatever you want me to say, right, and I'm going to pretend and just get out of here and be done with this. And she mentioned the boy from her school who did the same thing, essentially, whether came back and was like, here's my assembly. I swear to God, I'm okay now. I'm great. Let's.
Yeah, I took it as like the end of 1984, the I Love Big Brother moment, that she's been brainwashed now.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's wrong. Yeah, and maybe a little of both. And I did buy Riker's heartbreak, but I also think a week from now, it's like, what the hell was I doing? Like Kirk had Spock to remove those thoughts, but even if he hadn't, Kirk would have been like, oh, what planet am I on? Hey, what's your name? We know Riker will get there soon as well, but I I did think, again, I go back to, I thought Frakes and Melinda Kalea sold it. And, even though there's some groaner moments here and there in the episode, the other thing that made me think that Riker was okay with it was when he talks about how fun it can be to be primitive, which I was like, yep, that's a good line. He has some of my favorite pickup lines, and it's the taboo thing, and it's the, you know what, if I can get this androgynous non-gender person to go for me, I am awesome kind of a thing too. There is an ego thing going on there too.
So do you think when he goes to rescue her with Worf there, that is because he loves her or because he is so disgusted with the barbaric way the society treats their people? Would he do it? Yeah. Would he have done it if he wasn't in love with her? I guess for me, because I didn't buy the depth of their relationship, right. I didn't feel like it was earned. For me, it was like, no, this is an egregious thing that shouldn't happen to anybody. So I'm going to go stop it from happening.
You're there, but it's also, yeah. He was saying essentially to Picard too. I care about her.
I know he said that again.
No, I'm saying it's a combination of things. It's an added peril to a new relationship. Whether or not he's had time to process those feelings is probably some of that's infatuation. Some of it is probably the things that Stephen was saying about it sort of like made himself in love with the idea of what was going on there. And
the most likely outcome, whether they succeed or not, even if they succeed, is Riker and Worf both getting kicked out of Starfleet. So I don't understand. It, again, does not feel justified to me, and these were the issues I had with it.
Well, I think you said it right there. Or if you look at the two people who are going, you got the two warrior types who their character is largely based on, I will not back down from a dare kind of a thing. If you threaten me with something like this and I back down from that just for these mundane reasons, they probably that would really affect their self-image in that sense.
See, I think it's a stronger episode if we don't have him totally like in love with her and the moral question comes up and he's willing to throw away his career to rescue her from a moral standpoint. To me. But
do the two have to be mutually exclusive, though?
Right. They don't have to be, but again, I didn't think the relationship was that well done. And I know you two disagree, but I don't think it was that well done. I did wonder if the hearings closed, why Riker's able to just walk in. But, very much like the Enterprise.
Well, yeah, I mean, who would do it? I mean, it doesn't seem like the sort of society where people go, you know what? They don't have a lock on the door, so I'm just going to stroll right in.
Now, that one I didn't have a problem with because he was lying to try to save her, even though she didn't let him lie. And and that's the other reason why I think that she was definitely fully brainwashed at the end is, no, she was willing to stand up in court and not take the out and say, yeah, no, he's lying. I was a full participant.
All right. Well, here's the other thing. And this is again, going back to the conversion therapy. I can't necessarily relate to that in particular, but I can relate to the idea of when you really get a feeling for how thoroughly the system is stacked against you. Mm-hmm. When you realize that there is nothing you can do about it. You can make all the speeches you want. You can feel really brave in that one moment, but when somebody really puts you in a place where you understand that you're not getting out of there, that your life, they could kill you, they could do anything they wanted, and it's like, well, I tried, but maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And a lot of people are made to confront things like that. So
the other thing I really didn't buy was at the end, after the whole confrontation, Riker beams up and Picard clearly knew what he was doing, had no problem with it. It was totally cool. Starfleet gave him new orders and Picard's like, I just told him I didn't know when we were leaving here. And I'm like, really? Really? Picard's like totally cool with Riker breaking these laws and totally like throwing out everything. And then just like, and Starfleet took that as an answer, like, yeah, my guy's doing something questionable. You might want to kick him out of the fleet for. Can you just hold on and not make us call this mission right now? They're like, sure, go for it, whatever.
Do you think that's what Picard would actually have to say other than just like, hold on, I've got to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. Just hold on.
Picard is a galactically renowned ambassador, so I'm sure he found a really good way to say that.
I'm just saying, it run out of character for me. The episode was written by Jerry Taylor, who usually does the relationship stuff good. And, Yes, I could see a lot of her fingerprints on this. I do think this is before, and I've said this about other episodes she's written for Next Gen. I really feel like this is before she totally locked in and is the Jerry Taylor I know and love. Like she did some amazing writing for Voyager, but I think here she's not quite there yet, but she's getting there. And there were a lot of good things about the script, even if I didn't buy all the acting choices and stuff.
I actually looked into Jerry Taylor this week deeper than I usually do, and I found out, and this is the sports part of the podcast, she was married to Dick Enberg, who you guys probably don't know, but he was a sports announcer for a long time, for like 60 years. Did a lot of the NFL games, did some Super Bowls, did some NCAA championships. Really good announcer. His big thing was, oh my, I think he's actually in basketball, Keith, which so. I think he's. Nice. I think he's in basketball. He's definitely did a lot of film stuff. He passed away recently, but
I mean that catchphrase sounds familiar.
Yeah, but Jerry Taylor was married to him, so yeah, I found that out. I'm like, that's my kind of house. Star Trek sports. That's me. But
you could have married Jerry Taylor.
I could have. Yeah.
It was directed by one of our regulars, Robert Shearer. He doesn't direct as regularly as some, but he's done a bunch of episodes before. The other note I have is when Riker goes to talk to Troy, first of all, really interesting detail about her, like having received this Ancestors box and is going through it and really has nothing to do with anything. Nope. Like, I don't see that as related to the episode, but it's a cool detail. Gives her something to do.
Yeah.
But when their whole thing about, I've met someone I care deeply about, our relationship is going to have to change. It doesn't. Well, yeah, it does have to change. Blah, blah, blah. And then that goodbye kiss. The goodbye kiss, too. I think this proves what I've been saying, that they've been hooking up for a while.
Yeah.
They're friends with benefits, and this is her saying, we can't do the benefits anymore because I'm into somebody.
I thought the same thing because, we talked about the one episode where they're on shore leave or whatever, and they're holding hands, walking around, all that. I went back to all of our conversations about this in that moment. And I really like that scene. Again, I bought into the whole thing. So I was, I got misty during that scene. I thought it was very touching.
One of my favorite scenes of the episode, hands down. Yeah. Easily. It was a great scene.
The one with Troy, you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. But now if you're telling me they weren't sleeping together during the time of the Enterprise, I'm not going to believe you. You have to give me some counter arguments that negate what we've seen.
Well, my note about that was this would be a good time for Troy to bring up Worf.
Well, they haven't gone there yet. We're getting there. We're getting there. But yeah, it would have been a good time. Like, well, I'm kind of thinking about somebody too.
Yeah. That would have been really great for continuity, even if she didn't say who it was.
Yeah.
Especially if she didn't.
Yeah, I think you're right.
This is 1991 me talking. I'm going to blame 1990. When they said the Janai, I thought it was some kind of play on, I wrote it down as Gina. I was like, what is going on here? Like how is this spelled? But it turns out it's spelled J-I-N.
J apostrophe N-A-I-I.
That's it, yeah. So, which makes more sense. But without hearing it, I was like, the Magellan and the Onizaku are the two shuttles, which I thought they already got blown up before, but maybe not. Maybe they weren't those. Or
they could have been replicated, as it's weird.
But then later, another shuttle bites the dust. But I think it was the Janai shuttle that blew up, right? Or was it?
No, I think it was the one. Yeah, it was the one they flew out there and to rescue them because they said something about like, if we do this, it's going to blow up or something. I don't know.
Enterprise shuttles are like, especially on TNG, they're like Spinal Tap drummers. They're very disposable. Oh, one more shuttle note. When are we going to get seatbelts on those things? Come on, guys. Well, the injection, I can't remember who Crusher gives it to in this episode, but the air compression injections, me and my ex-wife always talked about like that. How are these not a thing now? How we've got the diagnostic bed that came from Star Trek.
So the hypo sprays.
The hypo spray, yes. Instead of a needle, and in my mind, I'm like, well, how would that work? And my thought is, it enters through your pores and shoots it through, rather than like a needle that has to hit.
Okay, so there's no intravenous thing happening. There's not going on.
No, it's in air. It's a jet of air.
Yeah. So
well, no, but like, how is it entering the body? Is the thing? Is it like?
I assumed like the air was just so like it gets forceful.
Soaked it, yeah. It gets soaked through your pores.
Goes through the pores, yeah.
So why hasn't this happened yet? Scientists for all the people that I'm afraid of needles.
I was until this year. Now I'm good. I've had enough of them this year. I'm over it.
I'm not afraid of them. I still don't look when they put them in me, but I still don't like them.
Same. I'm kind of somewhere in between.
All that botany talk, wasn't that all just euphemisms for sex?
That would make even more sense, wouldn't it?
Which is another reason I was probably all charged up. Oh, my last note, I already talked about this. Riker being heartbroken at the end. I bought that, and it felt very Requiem for Methuselah. And it also felt Requiem for Methuselah, I guess to your point, Jimmy Jerome, which is it does happen kind of fast. But I still buy this so many more times more than Requiem for Methuselah. My alternate episode was not just Riker and Soren, but they actually get away. And Riker actually, he has made the decision, I'm out of Starfleet. I'm going to live my life with this person. Now that calls for a longer episode or an arc of episodes, or a novel or whatever, or kind of thing. But that was my entire alternate episode.
So I had a few things. It's one goes back to what Jimmy was saying about acting. And so I note that, I think for most things when you have androgynous characters, actors seem to play them in a certain, like almost like Vulcans, like they're like emotionally dampened. I noticed that sort of thing. It feels like I've seen this type of character somewhere before, and I feel like that also is opposed to just another sort of mainstream kind of like, oh, this is so weird and icky. Ugh, they're not like, they're so not normal, and it's sort of like Vulcans and robots, with the, like beep boop. I am not, that kind of thing. So
they're genderless. I'm not emotionless.
Right. That seems strange. It's almost like there is some other chemical thing that must have happened in the process. There are a lot of things that I would have liked them to go, I guess, into scientifically. I mean, obviously including the genitalia. I mean, why not?
Sure.
I think that would have gone a long way to helping some of these things make more sense. She told the anecdote about the male identifying student, and they didn't really go into detail as to what exactly this person did. Like how did they identify that he was being a problem, and what would that entail to them other than just saying, you know what, I feel like I'm more male than female? Was he engaged in some relationship with someone who said that they felt female?
He was trying to start a football team. That was
but I mean, so what were the ramifications of this other than challenging the system or bucking the system? I think in that sort of thing works in a lot of other, and that is one of the things that makes it feel religious, to Jimmy's point earlier. And when you have those societies who are based on some sort of religious aspect that can't stand up to logic, reason, dissension. But for this, I mean, what was he going to do? I still don't really understand. And I guess that's also the point that she makes in her closing speech too. How do we affect your life? And that's something we always want to shout to the homophobes out there. What is this doing that's hurting you?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I guess, I think I'm going to talk myself out of it. Maybe that's the point. We're not supposed to see them do something specific. They go, well, yeah, he's doing that, so why wouldn't you? All right. That's enough of that then. So the other thing was, I guess I touched on the heavy-handedness, and this is again the making all of them women, making them like excessively attractive to someone who's looking who is obviously attracted to women. Watching this, they would go, oh, yeah, sure. Why wouldn't you take this risk? Or I could see you falling in love with this person without really addressing.
Maybe that's my problem. Maybe it's my superficiality, but I was not attracted to her and could not see myself in that situation. So
interesting.
Maybe that's my own bias getting in the way of my enjoyment of the episode.
Perhaps, but I think that would enhance some aspects of or make it at least seem a little bolder or more poignant than it was, because it felt more like I don't feel like they got across that same sense of irrational aversion to what is happening. The heavy-handedness, again, we were on the nose. I was saying it reminded me of like White Man's Burden, the movie with John Travolta back then. That popped in my head. The idea being that they just reversed the roles of black people and white people in this movie, so that you're seeing all the white actors play these other parts, and I'm not sure, thinking back, what purpose that sort of thing would serve overall for like a feature length. But it seemed like the old time, Star Trek strategy of the TOS thing of, we have to visually completely show you this whole thing in reverse, so you can go, what, that doesn't make any sense, or, oh God, that poor person because he looks like me. That thing, but
Mm-hmm.
same sort of concept here with heterosexuality being under attack. Well, these poor oppressed heterosexuals, So that's it.
Let's get to the rankings. Before we rank this episode, I forgot when we recorded the last 2 episodes that when there's a kid prominent in an episode, we're going to rank how annoying they are. So in Power Play, Baby Molly, on a scale of 1 to 10, how annoying was Baby Molly?
I don't remember.
Power Play was...
They were in 10 forward, and evil Troy O'Brien and Data were holding hostage.
Yeah. That was
I'm going the baby at like a 5 because she did keep crying at inopportune times, but at the same time, like, how did she not eat or go to the potty that whole time? So,
She was a trooper.
I'm going to give her a 7.
Keith?
It's hard for me to get a good baseline here, but I mean, at least a 5, at least. Let's make it a 6.
Okay, Molly was a 6. And Alexander in ethics, how annoying was he? I'm giving him a 0.
Yeah, I thought he was. I liked him a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely not annoying at all. Like, handled it better than we should expect him to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Molly's a 6, Alexander's a 0. There were no kids in this one, but who was your annoyance of the week?
Well,
mine was
what's their name? The overseer or the spy?
Yeah, the
spy?
Deny. Yeah,
the Deny that just noticed that they were hanging out and made a deal about it.
Yeah.
For right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but it's something like that.
Yep, Krite is correct. I am going to go with. Oof. I want to go with Riker. I want to go with Worf. I want to go with Crusher.
Since you mentioned that, I mean, I might have gone with Worf or Crusher if given the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Worf. That whole Women Week thing, I can't take it. Who are you going to have a drink with in this one?
I'm going to have a drink with Soren.
Of course you are.
Because she asks everybody about their organs. And then I'm going to tell her about my liver. And I'm going to try and impress her, and I don't think I'm going to do as well as Riker. Although he got shot down too, so whatever.
Well, I mean...
Eventually he got shot down. I'm going to unbrainwash her by brainwashing her the opposite way.
Well, Soren, because of, I mean, he already touched on some of the reasons. I mean, the main reason, of course, is to have a reciprocal discussion about genitalia instead.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I wasn't attracted to Soren, but I would have a drink with Soren because I think there's some interesting discussion to be had there. And I would want to have it. And I'm open about such things. So, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I think, I kind of already did my alternate episode, the Robin and Marianne, Riker and Soren kind of thing. But also, my dinner with Soren would be more, that would be interesting to me too, if the entire episode was those two having the more elevated parts of their conversation as opposed to the men are from Mars, women are from Venus. But although I think that's going to end up being a part of any conversation along those lines to an extent.
With or without the flirtation?
Yeah. Either. I'll take it either way.
Great. Then let's rank the episode. Let's start with a similar theme, I guess, in terms of like a society that people might be messing with by their sexual dalliances, and Masterpiece Society. Better or worse?
It's a good comparison.
Mm-hmm.
I would go above.
You think this one was better than Masterpiece Society?
Yeah, I do.
Interesting.
I had problems with this one, but I think what they were trying to do deserves to be a little bit higher than I guess it's better than the sum of its parts in that regard.
That's a very good point. I mean, I was going to say that I felt like there was more going on in Masterpiece Society, or I felt like a little bit more swerved in some of the things that happened.
Yeah, this is a little more topic.
The scientist twist, I think, really. I think I'd still keep Masterpiece above for that reason.
You put Masterpiece above?
Yeah. The discussions that were going on, I think, were a little deeper.
All right, now I'm going to ask the question: what's above Masterpiece Society?
Darmok.
Ooh.
Okay. And what's below it?
Ethics.
Okay.
I liked ethics better than this. How did ethics end up below Masterpiece Society?
That's what I was about to say. I think I liked ethics better too.
Probably me.
Was Masterpiece Society like better than I thought?
We
See, now we've gotten too far away from it, and it's not fresh in your mind as far as
Yeah, that was before we took like 2 months off.
I like this episode, but I think I liked ethics better, but I think I would put it under both, which surprised me because I like this. I thought I liked this episode more than you guys, but it all gets very subjective. What's below that? Well, it doesn't matter, I guess. So I guess I would go below Masterpiece Society.
Okay. Well, if we're going below Masterpiece, I want to go below Ethics.
Okay.
Conundrum is below that.
Makes sense. It's appropriate that should be there.
Matter of perspective.
Yeah, I enjoyed Conundrum more, but I think the importance of what they were trying to do here, I would put it above Conundrum. Yeah. Keith, you good with that?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I mean, those all make sense.
Okay.
As Riker said, it's complex.
Next week, Cause and Effect. The Enterprise gets caught in a time loop, which always has one result: total destruction of the ship itself. Spoiler alert, thank you very much. Also, the image on IMDb is Kelsey Grammer in the old uniform.
Ooh.
So,
I wasn't sure if that was
IMDb really needs to fix this page.
Yeah.
In my opinion. I'm not going to fight them again. We got our one victory. I'm calling it quits. So, until then, live long.
Live your life and prosper.
Yeah.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?